Welcome back, panelists here. Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, former Congresswoman Donna Edwards of Maryland, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Casey DC on MSNBC, Kasie Hunt, and David Brooks, columnist for the New York Times. Let me put here, speaking of the New York Times, David, your newspaper, I thought did a pretty good job of trying to show what equivalent shutdowns would look like in corporate America. So, for instance, the Department of Agriculture being down, that's the equivalent of one Goldman Sachs. The Department of Treasury being shut down is the equivalent, apparently, of 3 Facebooks, employee-wise. And the Department of Interior, 10 Netflixes. Trying to put some context into this shutdown. David, it seems to me that's what's missing here, the sense of urgency in this.
Make it seem like so good. I mean, I'd love to shut down Goldman Sachs.
Really? Oh.
Great. Listening to the conversation, the thing that strikes me is we're the country that won World War II. We defeated fascism. We defeated the Japanese. We launched this complicated thing. And now we've shut down our government because we can't decide if it's a concrete wall or a steel fence or a row of ferns. It's just like a sign of government dysfunction. And it seems to me the answer here is just sitting in front of everyone, which is the wall for the DACA deal. Mm-hmm. And the reason that has not gotten done is because both sides have loaded up a bunch of stuff on that simple deal and made it impossible for the other side to accept. So some basic competence in negotiation would just get us out of this.
Casey, it seems to me Capitol Hill would come up with that compromise if the president weren't involved.
It's possible, but I mean, Chuck, how many times does Congress do a big, complicated, what would have to be a bipartisan thing under this kind of a deadline? It simply doesn't work that way. And in this case, the political incentives are just all screwed up. I mean, in previous shutdowns, usually somebody has been trying to force a shutdown because they want to make a political point. That's not the case here. Yeah. Nobody really wants a shutdown. Certainly Congress doesn't want a shutdown. And it's simply not clear how they get anywhere without somebody simply caving in. I mean, the president has essentially backed himself into a corner. I mean, I've covered now more shutdowns than I really care to think about.
Crazy.
And I do not see a way out of this one. Whereas the others, you could see how the political pressure was going to build on one side. It was inevitable that they would eventually cave in, the government would reopen. That does not seem to be the case here.
Where's this headed?
Well, that's because in many previous shutdowns, the two sides are arguing for the middle. That's not the case here. In fact, what you have is the Democrats have public opinion behind them. Public wants the government open, and they don't like the idea of a wall.
Margin.
But the president has his Republican Party and his supporters strongly behind him. They want the wall, and they're prepared to shut down part of the government. So the real question is, when does the pain threshold become
too much, right?
Too much for either side? And that's why I thought it was interesting that you did see some Republicans in the House, some Republicans, 2 or 3 in the Senate, voice maybe it is time to reopen at least part of the government until we get these negotiations going. Is Trump going to listen to them, or is he going to listen to the base? And on the other side, you know, Democrats are the party of government and government employees. If this thing stretches on for months, then maybe their own base starts saying, you know what, it's just $5 billion. We need to be paid.
Donna, what is that? You've represented the district right here, you know, plenty of government workers. What do you think the pain threshold is going to be for members of Congress that used to be in your shoes on this?
Well, I think the pain threshold is going to hit this week. This is the week where paychecks should be going out. It's the week where you begin to see more than just trash piling up at the national parks, where people really are in pain. And keep in mind that of those 800,000 federal workers and the additional contractors, probably 80% of them live someplace other than the Washington metropolitan region. And so members across the country in districts and senators in their states are going to begin to hear from their subcontractors, from federal employees, that this really is causing them pain. They're not able to make their mortgage payments, daycare payments, all of those things, in addition to the things that Mr. Hoyer mentioned. And so I think this is the week, to me, this is the crucial week when those stories start to come out, and it is not sustainable, particularly with some of the some senators who are going to be up in 2020 and are vulnerable.
What would be your, if you were there now, would you want the leadership to be willing to be a little more malleable on this or not?
Well, here's what the Democrats offered. I mean, for the first time ever that you can imagine, Democrats actually passed a Republican bill. They didn't have to do that, but they did it to say, here, we're going to get government open. And I think this week a strategy of beginning to pass these individual bills that have passed the Senate and open up parts of the government that provide services is one direction, because then it leaves open the opportunity to just negotiate around the Department of Homeland Security.
This is all about Senate Republicans right now.
I think it is all about Senate Republicans. And Mitch McConnell is in a very strange spot. I mean, you've heard him say repeatedly this week, I'm not putting something on the floor the president won't sign. Now, that has been interpreted as Mitch McConnell going along with this president on the border wall. I actually read something slightly different into it, which is to say that Mitch McConnell was assured by a third party, Mike Pence, at lunch one day, that the president was going to sign the thing that he was going to put on the floor. And then all of a sudden, that turned out not to be true. Mitch McConnell came out and said, you don't learn anything from the second kick of the mule. He told me, I'm confident we won't have a shutdown. Here we are. He was embarrassed. So there's really no advantage for him in doing that again. On the other hand, Mitch McConnell thinks shutdowns are bad politics. He said it 1,000,001 times, and he knows it's bad for those vulnerable Republicans in 2020. And I think that's the underlying thing here. And I think you're correct to think that if there is going to be a place where it gives, it's probably there.
I mean, I think there might be pressure from Senate Republicans, but President Trump is still fixated on that base. He needs to have the shutdown continue to such a point that he can turn to his base and say, I gave it my all. We're not there yet. And he needs that base because the base is the difference between a 42% approval rating and a 35%
and impeachment hangs over all this. He's got to keep the Senate Republicans.
That's exactly what I was about to prod you about.
Because he needs those people in case there's an impeachment.
The president, who's more fixated on impeachment, the new House Democrats or the President of the United States? Take a listen to him on Friday on this topic.
We even talked about that today. I said, why don't you use this for impeachment? And Nancy said, we're not looking to impeach you. I said, that's good, Nancy, that's good. But you know what? You don't impeach people when they're doing a good job.
David, he brings it up almost as much as some of these new members of Congress do.
I love him for a guy who's sort of not totally honest. He's totally unhidden. I mean, he reveals everything. He's transparent. It's clearly got to be on his mind. The Mueller investigation is something he tweets about all the time. There are a bunch of investigations. And what he's going to do, and this is why it's going to get so ugly over the course of the year, is I assume something's going to happen. There are a bunch of investigations. There's going to be some sort of indictment. He's not going to defend himself the way Richard Nixon defended himself. Nixon had an unconscious deference to the institutions of this society. Donald Trump does not have that. He's going to try to save himself by attacking the institutions.
Donna, is impeachment hearings inevitable in this new House?
I don't think it's inevitable, but I do think that Democrats are prepared to go where the evidence takes them. And the question is Nancy Pelosi holding that at bay so that the evidentiary base is there. I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but we're getting close.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.